Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon and I'm the Dean of Graduate Studies at Charles Darwin University. Welcome to Outrider 58, Drafting and Editing. We're nearing the end of our writing series and we are entering what I believe is the most difficult component of writing, and that is editing. But we're going to assemble some operational principles for you today that might just change your life and certainly change how you approach writing. And our first operational principle, colleagues, is that writing is separate from editing. Writing is separate from editing. They are different processes. They are different behaviours. And can I say the most frustrating students, the most frustrating colleagues and researchers I work with and try and help and support are the crew that radically confuse writing and editing. So they write a sentence and they then go back and rewrite it and edit it and they just keep going. And they're the people who say to me, oh, look, I wrote 150 words today. And I'm sort of thinking, what is going on? Because, to be frank, I write about 5,000 words a day on a reasonably solid day. That's not a great day. I have written 10,000 words a day. Yeah. But for our students and our colleagues that write a sentence and endlessly edit it and edit it and edit it, you're often perfectionists. You are the most difficult people to help. So this operational principle will change your life. So let's make a decision as a family to separate the writing process and the editing process. That is the path to madness if you converge them. And that's why Outrider 51 to 57 did not mention editing. It talked about reading and writing and rewriting. Do not think about editing your text until you have the first draft. These are radically different processes. So therefore maintain a very, very clear perspective and boundary between your writing and your editing. But of course, we've already mentioned the word that sort of conflates it all a bit, and that is the word drafting. So what's drafting? And actually, writing is drafting. You are drafting your ideas into writing. So that's why your pretty raw writing is called the first draft. Therefore, do not collapse drafting and editing. We often conflate them as words, as nouns and verbs, and that's wrong. Drafting is the writing down of your ideas. Editing is the series of processes that occur after the first draft, the alpha draft, is completed. Now, the alpha draft is a very special and important moment. I get so excited when that first draft is finished. Woo, 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 yeah, it's fabulous. The alpha draft, you've completed it, knock yourself out, brilliant, party on Garth. And you need to work as quickly as you can to get to this alpha draft. So our first mantra of the day is write your first draft. Get the alpha draft in place and do not edit. Do not edit. Right. Cool. Now, let's move to the completely separate stage. Boof, boof, you got your alpha draft. Let's move to the separate stage, which is editing. Editing is the second stage of the writing process. And this is where we look at what we have written, our draft, and we rework it, we improve it, we revise it. Cool. There are a lot of methodologies in editing, how editing can take place. It is like skinning the proverbial cat, hopefully without the mindless violence. But let me present for one moment the process that I was taught. I've obviously professional editor, I've done the courses, and so let me, in a truncated fashion, in 20 minutes, what's often taken me 2,000 hours, but in 20 minutes, let me explain how editing is taught to professional editors and what we can learn from it. So for those of you that have done editing courses, you'll recognize a lot of what's going on here. So, okay, cool. We have the alpha draft. Now, what I need you to do in what's called the first pass, I need you to read the alpha draft from beginning to end. And this is called the first copy editing draft. So we are copy editing at this point. And what I do is I have a piece of paper, or indeed, of course, one of my cards. I have a piece of paper next to me as I'm doing this first edit, this copy edit, and I'm writing down things that are worrying me. So these could include, for example, if I'm overusing particular words, like, oh no, not that word again. So I write that word down. Or I'm saying, wow, these structures, these sections, they're not talking to each other, right? That's a real problem. And what was going on with that introduction? That introduction does not remotely say what's going on in the rest of it. So you're logging right, this word's a problem, I'm overusing that. That word, I don't even know what that word means. I need to work out what that word means and if it operates there, right? So you're writing down the meta points in response to this first copy edit. And of course, this is the copy edit where you do the spelling and the grammatical checking. And this is where we start to get into software. Now, I'm not anti automated software, generative AI. I'm not anti any of this, but we need to recognize, as someone who has worked with a lot of this software for a lot of years, because I'm that old, don't trust the software. Particularly if one is an academic, because what the software, the automated software, is encouraging of us as academics is to, and I'll use the dreadful phrase, dumb down our writing. So bring what is very specialist vocabulary down to something that the software can handle. So just be very, very aware as an academic that the software can hurt us. So never sort of do the software and go, correct all. Never, ever, ever, ever do that. Look at what the software suggests, the spelling and grammar, learn from it. But to be honest with you, I accept about probably 10% of what the software says. Oh, is that an issue? And I go, no, that's not an issue. That's called an academic vocabulary. Cool. Secondly, what we're looking for in this first edit are consistencies and inconsistencies, and this is a hard one. So we're looking that the headings are the same size, the margins are right, fonts, etc. And look, references are the references where they need to be. My first edit, I go, oh, I've missed a reference there. So I do big R with my pen. I do big REF, making sure the references are scaffolding my argument, right? Now, if you're preparing this piece for a journal or as a book, at this first edit stage, get yourself the house style. Sometimes it's a template, but get yourself the house style in the journal or the book publisher. I print that out. I sit it next door to me, and at this stage I start to go, right, what do they want? The spelling, recognise with a Z, with an S, get all that sorted out at this draft. Okay. What I also do at this early stage, I do this a lot, this has been a blessing to me, is I do a find and replace. So this is the copy editing moment where you being your own editor is great, because you know your writing better than any other human. So do you repetitively enact shortcuts to your argument? And if you do, then you can search for particular words and fix that up. So let me give you an example. As we talked about, I think a couple of weeks ago, transitions are incredibly difficult in writing, okay? And to get to that alpha draft, the transitions are probably the weakest, right? Because it is the hardest bit of writing. So when I am doing this first edit, I look for words that I endlessly use. So I look for particularly yet and however, sometimes conversely. Yet, however, conversely, because they are weak transitions. So I know I do it. I go, yet, you sad woman. So I do a find yet and replace it with something better, or in many cases, I can simply delete it. So find and delete. Now, we all have these words that we use too much. I have mine on a card. I add to it all the time. And I, in this first edit, find those dreadful words and go, Tara, what were you thinking? Then go in there and remove those words. I have 2 other pieces of advice to offer at this first edit stage, the copy edit stage. Now, make a decision if you want to do this first draft on screen or on paper. I do this first draft on a screen, but also remember I do 30 plus, quite frequently 50 plus edits on my work. So I do a lot of repetitive sweeps. So this first edit for me is on a screen. But you need to recognize and remember the value of a paper draft. I move between the platforms because a screen-based edit and a paper-based edit, they find different errors. There are reasons for that. We can talk about it in the comments if you want to have a chat about it, but they find different errors. Multimodality 101. And the final bit of advice I offer to colleagues that are really underconfident with editing. So they're worried about their writing, they're underconfident, and the idea of editing just freaks them out. Well, the best way to teach yourself how to edit is on the screen with your software reading your text aloud. An amazing bit of kit, this. So what happens is, and by the way, the theory behind this strategy is defamiliarization. Defamiliarization. So what happens is we all miss errors when we read and read and read and read the same text. But what happens is if you sit and the text is read to you by the computer, defamiliarization, you find all sorts of interesting new errors. So if you are underconfident, use your visual literacy, read the text, but read it while activating your sonic literacy. And when those literacies converge, you're teaching yourself to find new errors. Excellent. You'll be amazed how many errors emerge here. So look, I know this first copy edit is an absolute shocker. I hate myself. I swear at myself. I have lots of really unfortunate self-talk. Tara, you are an absolute moron. You are a moron, Tara. You are an embarrassment to your father. And when I'm really, really down on myself, I say, you're an embarrassment to your mother. And trust me, Doris doesn't get embarrassed by anything. But this is a painful draft. I get that because you're sort of confronting your own incompetence. I get that. But do the obvious stuff. And then you know what? Congratulate yourself. Wow. Because what you've just done is you've taken the alpha draft and like those appalling alpha men, like Andrew Tate, you have improved on the alpha draft by editing, intelligence, precision, and care. Now, we're in the edit zone here, and the key is editing is a structured process. Editing from editors is often described as passes or waves. So this first pass is relatively straightforward and you've got rid of the really embarrassing stuff. So that's brilliant. Now let's go to the second pass, which is the content draft. So what we're looking at here is substance and structure and the relationship between the two. So the focus of the second pass is consistency. So firstly, is there a relationship between the abstract, the introduction, and the conclusion? Now, so often I go, because often you write the abstract first, and you go, this is what I think I'm going to do. Yeah, nah. So read the abstract, intro, and conclusion, and see that they all actually fit together. Now, have a look at your data sets. Have you over-egged the interpretation? Have you talked about causality when it's clearly a correlation and a relatively weak one? Now, is your interpretation of the data sets overblown? Really important. Now, check the references. Are the references dated? Are they from a decade ago? Do you look like this is old knowledge? Are your references a bit patchy, a bit partial? We're also doing the hard stuff here. We're looking for the analytical jumps. So here's an argument you're making in one paragraph, and then what is going on with the next paragraph. So there is a jump there. I often do this particular edit on paper. And so when I see that, I see it a lot, I go that paragraph and that paragraph, there's a jump, and I write jump because I do it on paper, and I draw a big arrow, I turn the page over, and I write the paragraph that's the transition between those two ideas on the back. And that's why I think paper drafts are very good at this point. Also see if there's anything that's unnecessary here. This happens a lot too. So I'm reading it going, what is going on here? So, suddenly there are 3 paragraphs on RuPaul, and I'm writing on Alexandra Kollontai. I'm going, why exactly are there 3 paragraphs on RuPaul? So you scoop them out, put them in their own magical RuPaul article that you're going to write in a couple of months, and keep the focus on Alexandra Kollontai. Cool. So there's also some really deep attention on references here beyond the copy edit. You are checking the order, and you're doing that terrible order. So those of you using the force of darkness in the culture, which is the Harvard referencing style, this is where you're checking Brabazon 2020 A, Brabazon 2020 B, and it refers to the right stuff, yeah? For those of you who are the Jedi Knights of intellectual culture and you are using Chicago footnotes, respect. But here you've got to look at the ibid and the opset, particularly if you're adding references. So check that they're used correctly. And as you're adding references, the ibid and the opsets still make sense. And of course, if there's anything missing from your references, yep, you find that now and you fill that in. Okay, once we're here, we're doing the final check on your edit 2, your second pass. Does the structure work? Do the sections work? Are you guiding somebody through the argument? So it's that sort of stuff. Great. Living the dream. Second pass done. Let's hit the hard third pass. This is the edit for language. This is the sentence by sentence correction. This is where we go into the figures and the tables, which is the path to madness. So not only are you correcting every sentence, but after you've corrected it, you have to go back to the start of that sentence and read it again to make sure that you haven't introduced errors. Crucial. So check the cross-referencing in the document, figures, tables, appendices. So make sure if you're saying Appendix 1, it goes to something. There is an Appendix 1. I read a thesis last month that talked about Appendix 7. I went to Appendix 7. There was no Appendix 7. So make sure it all fits together like a happy little family. Yep. And then at the end of this particular editing pass, put another spelling checker through it to make sure you haven't introduced errors. This is starting to become important. Now, I find this particular edit much easier to run on screen. Sometimes I go screen, I then do a paper version, embed the paper corrections, and then go to the edit once more. And I know this seems tedious. This one is tedious. It is like basically watching your toenails grow. I understand that. But the fourth pass is when we're particularly focusing on scholarly monographs, the book, but also the PhD. So this is where the fourth pass becomes crucial. And what you're doing is you're making sure that all the corrections that you're making are consistent throughout the entire document. Okay, so for a PhD, that's 100,000 words. For a scholarly monograph, between 70 and 80,000 words. So margins, formatting, numbers, transitions. And the fifth pass is the one that I really, really enjoy. This is the one, and as I've got older and experienced and even closer to death, I've realized that the fifth pass in many ways is the most crucial. It's the one I most enjoy. And that's when you place attention on the audience. So you're editing your work with your prospective audience in mind. Now, at this point, what you're checking is you're not carrying through the prose any assumptions in the knowledge system. The argument is signposted for your reader. So, for example, in your PhD, at the beginning of your conclusion, so the introduction of your conclusion, are you telling your examiner what's going to happen in this conclusion, or do you hammer straight into your research questions? Yeah, no. What's happening in the conclusion? Shape it for the audience. And remember, this also may be a reader of a journal, so you're thinking that it might be a professional journal, might be an academic journal. Who's the audience? And of course, this audience pass is absolutely crucial for a PhD. And so many supervisors are burying this information and they're lying to you, to be frank. Remember, for PhD students, the audience for your thesis are PhD examiners. Do not confuse peer review and a journal audience for PhD examiners. I'm reading so many theses where these articles in their original formatting, which of course is a breach of copyright, in their original formatting are slammed into these theses. And it is so offensive to a senior colleague, a PhD examiner, to see that you've had so little respect for their time that you haven't even reformatted an academic journal article into a chapter for a thesis. How disrespectful is that? They're not the same. So recognize your audience as you do this pass through your thesis. Remember that they are examining a thesis. They're not looking at a collection of articles. Different things. So this fifth pass ensures that your writing connects to its very specific audience. Put another way, what I'm asking you to think about is the relationship between content, purpose, and audience. So they are the 5 crucial passes through your script, and you should see a radical improvement in your writing through those 5 passes. You should see, I tend to look for at least a 20% improvement in each edit. So to finish off this Outrider, I wanted to give you the different languages, the vocabulary that is used to describe these different types of edits. And I want to make sure that if you're using an editor through your career for the PhD or beyond, that you actually know what the editing languages refer to, the functions and the purpose. And just a caveat here, and it's an important one, particularly for our Australian colleagues watching this Outrider, Australia in particular very strongly limits what a professional editor can do on a thesis, and I'll talk about precisely what they are. So professional editors who are not your supervisors, who are not you as a student, because you as a student, you can learn to edit. Those professional editors are limited to the work they can do on your thesis to present to examination. Now, you've heard me say in the past, my students do not use editors. They do not use editors, and there are many reasons for that. One is, I won't get emotional, but one is the PhD examiner deserves the robust respect to know that the work that they are reading, the student has produced. So I believe passionately in the independence of a PhD examiner and examination, and I want them to examine a student's capacity to communicate. That's part of what I'm assessing as an examiner. Can this human write about research in a productive and passionate and clear way? But I lost that battle 20 years ago. I fought hard, but I lost that battle. So now editors, professional editors, are allowed to enact certain functions on a PhD text, and you pay them to do that work, and that payment will be anywhere between Australian money, $2,000 to about $4,000. $3,000 is the sweet spot. So this is a lot of dough. That may encourage you to start to do some of those editing courses yourself. But please remember, don't lose confidence. Don't think, oh, I can't write, oh, I can't edit. Editing is a series of skills that you learn. There might be some stuff about writing and natural ability and stuff. I don't want to comment about that. But editing is a series of skills and behaviours that you learn. Cool. So there are two types of editing that professional editors enact, and that is mechanical editing and substantive editing. Mechanical editing and substantive editing. They're sometimes called different things. But mechanical editing is what is permitted for professional editors to do on your PhD. And this is basically the first few passes we talked about in this Outrider. So copy editing, right? Spelling, grammar, inconsistencies, sentence construction. Okay, that is mechanical editing. The other type of editing that is called substantive editing is also termed, and this is actually more common to be honest, development or developmental editing. That is not allowed in the doctoral space. But this is the developmental editing, is the big picture editing, improving the ideas in the text, reshaping the structure and the content, form and content relationships. And so these are changes to structure, content, and organisation. And this is not permitted in the doctoral space, the use of an editor. Okay, editing, whether mechanical or substantive, is very, very different from the process of writing. These are different skill sets, and yes, they can be related, but sometimes they're not related at all. Therefore, when you have your alpha draft, go woo, 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 yeah, but then take off the writer's hat, take a breath, and put on the editor's hat. That is a different way of engaging with text. Editing can take longer than writing. In fact, in my case, editing always takes longer than writing. And editing at its best starts with developmental editing because it explores the big picture form and content relationships and then moves to the more mechanical editing forms. So we do need to teach students editing. That's why we've got this Outrider, because I believe in you and I believe you deserve to know how editing operates rather than sort of outsourcing it to a professional editor. And don't get me wrong, there's so many great places for a professional editor. I'm a professional editor. I know the skill set involved there. But can I say it is also incredibly important that we teach our students how to edit. You deserve to have this skill set, okay? And also I understand your supervisors are incredibly busy. I get that. I'm reading about 400,000 words a week of students' work to edit before I remotely get to my own work to edit. But always remember from our work last week that all writing is rewriting, but please remember that the best writers are actually the best editors. What we're looking for is precision in word selection. We're looking for a diversity of words and vocabulary in your writing. I'm looking for sentence variety. I'm also looking for sentence and paragraph flow, ensuring those very difficult transitions. So I then enact one final pass on my writing. You can see the state of me. I'm actually doing one of these tonight after I've done my day's work today. So I'm going to enact this final pass on one of my articles tonight. And although this is part of mechanical editing, it is the most precise and difficult, and that is line editing. So I finish off and I sit with my writing double spaced on paper, and I read it with a ruler. So I have a very, very long, which one have I got now? It's a black one. I brought the black one over to New Zealand. So I've got my beautiful, big, thick black ruler, and I put it under each line, blocking out the text below it. And I read each line, again, defamiliarized, to pick up any last errors. And so this means I see the sentence differently and I find any final issue or problem. Now, I know all of this may seem incredibly tedious and dull. Look, I see editing as doing a really complicated jigsaw puzzle that you can't quite see it at the start, but then by the end, the excitement and the momentum that you can see what your editing has done to your prose, it's just stunning. And whenever I sort of remember, I do 30, 40, 50 drafts. So whenever I think, oh, can I do one more edit, or how about I actually go and see if the sun's up at some point? Whenever I think, will I stop at this point? I push on. And let me tell you why I push on with my editing. And I push on with my editing because of the gift that readers give to us. The people who read our work, they are gifting us 30 minutes of their lives in the case of an article, maybe a couple of hours, in the case of a book, maybe a couple of weeks. Those remarkable humans have given us their time. Wow. So we need to respect that and give our audience, give our readers the absolute best work that we can deliver to them. As I'm incredibly old, I've still never lost that sense of the incredible privilege that readers give to us. We are so lucky that these humans remotely, with so many fabulous things to do, that they've decided to sit with us and sit with our ideas and read our work. So the least that we can do is write with fire and energy and passion, and edit with precision and care and clarity. I wish you love, light, and peace. Tea out.